Good afternoon. We've got our regular Tintri Tuesday, and this week for each video I'm doing it all on my own. Normally, we've got an interviewee, and I can just ask them lots of questions, and they give me all the answers. But this week it's all down to me to provide both the questions and the answers. So a little bit different to normal, but hopefully you enjoy the set, and it's also the first set that we're going through LinkedIn Live. Yesterday we had some technical issues, so we didn't get out on time. I had to do a recording and upload that afterwards. So I do apologise if you did join us yesterday for the LinkedIn Live that didn't happen at 3 o'clock yesterday for what we'd normally have is our Diamante Monday. So today, Tintri Tuesday, so it's all things Tintri. And I thought it might be good to give you a bit of a history around the Tintri side with ourselves. I was looking back at the first time we started dealing with Tintri, and it was over 8 years ago, so quite some time ago. And it was when they'd first come to the UK. And we started working with a very small team of Andrew Coskelly, also Mark Young, who was great on the technical side as well, and also Jerry Mumford. There was just the three of them in the UK, and we started dealing with them at that point in time. What we saw was something very different in the technology because originally it'd been set up by the VP of development over at VMware because he'd seen that there was an issue using standard storage technology for a VMware environment, and that it really was jury rigged to fit into that environment. It was designed for something quite different, past a standard SAN type infrastructure. The idea with Tintri was design it specifically for a virtualized environment, predominantly VMware at that point in time. Just to give you a bit of background, Tintri actually is Gaelic for lightning as well, and it was part of the process that you wanted to ensure you got the best performance out of it as well. So what really impressed me and also the rest of the team with Tintri was its simplicity. It was a really simple platform to implement. With the traditional environment, you would need to create RAID groups and you'd need to set up your LUNs and then I attached those to your vCenter, and it took time to get everything ready. You needed to over provision to get performance and also capacity, and it was a challenge using traditional SAN type infrastructure. Whereas with the Tintri unit, you plugged it into the rack, you gave it power, connected to the network, and it could be up and running in at least the most 30 minutes. I think the most we've ever taken to get one up and live is 30 minutes. So really quick to get it on board and running. So, a really great piece of technology in that respect. I think what we've also seen over the last 8 years working with our customers who've implemented Tintri is around the confidence with the technology. Because if they've actually implemented Tintri and then put workloads onto it, they've always found they worked. There was no issues with performance or any hit on any of the other workloads when they put a workload on there. And that's many of our customers have said that. And it's really down to the way that the system self-tunes because it looks at each of the workloads and ensures it gives each workload enough capacity from a performance and capacity perspective give the best performance. And that's also for throughput and latency as well. So with the hybrid units, we're looking at sub-millisecond latency. We're actually looking at even sub-microsecond latency now with the new technologies that are predominantly all flash-based, the new DDN-based products, C6000. So a real benefit in that respect as well, that you didn't have to consider, will this work, will this not work when you put a workload on it? Can it bring down some of my other production workloads if I do? Unlike some of the other storage technologies people were using at the time. Also, there was a thing around understanding like the visibility of capacity and performance. A lot of technologies, as you actually add more and more workloads onto them, the problem you get is they start to slow down when they hit around about 70%. And as you go above 70%, it gets slower and slower. With the Tintri units, you're guaranteed to get the performance up to near a full capacity. You can't really go beyond 99% really because you've got nowhere to store any data when you're trying to write. But as you get up towards that top end, there is no degradation in performance. Also, it was built as a active passive controller set, so that if you did fail over to the secondary controller, you would always have the same level of performance and low latency as if you were actually on the primary controller. So there was no loss in that as you switch from one to the other. And again, that added a great value to organizations, guaranteed that level. But I think one of the great things was the diagnostic capabilities. So what you can do is look at each virtual machine and understand exactly what's happening with it from a throughput and also a latency perspective. So if you've got an issue, it's quite easy to go to a particular virtual machine, bring the details up of that virtual machine, look at the latency stats, and you can actually look at point in time, say over the last 7 days, or using the Tintri Global Centre, look back 30 days and actually identify what level of latency you had when there was an issue. So it could be it was a week ago and you didn't know about it, and a customer's come and said, "I've got a problem, that happened a little while ago. Could you look into it?" You could go back and actually identify where the issue was, or in real time. So you've got a problem existing straight away, or you brought to view one by seeing it live on the actual real-time stats. But what it gives you is not just the statistics around the storage, it also gives you metrics around the network and the compute, because it's taking that information directly from the network stats and also directly from vCenter. So what you can see on there is you can see exactly how much latency you're getting from the storage, from the network or the host. And when you go to the host, you can break that down into other pieces like, is it CPU or memory related? Is it swap space for that particular workload as well? So you can really identify quite quickly where the problem is. And it stops a lot of the finger pointing within some organizations between different departments, saying it's not us, it's you, no, it's network, it's storage, it's, and the kind of things that you too sometimes get. So really helps in that respect. If we look at today, what we're doing now is moving forward into utilizing the technology for hosting SQL databases, not just the actual virtual machine. The actual SQL server could be within a virtual machine on the infrastructure, or it could be a physical workload or a cluster, and you're actually just mounting the SQL Server database upon the platform. This gives you the ability now to granularly um, give optimized performance for the databases themselves, but also it gives you the ability to give self-service capabilities to the DBAs and the developers. So they're not having to wait for the storage people to build out some infrastructure for them to utilize. Also, when you're creating them, you can clone off an existing database. And when you do it, because the way that the technology uses dedupe and compression, until the actual database goes beyond the size of the original it was cloned from, it takes no space. So you're not doubling up in capacity straight away by duplicating one of your databases. It's only using the same amount of space initially, but as you diverse from the actual original, you start to take up a bit more space. So really, really good from a capacity perspective. I think one of the other things that's really good is when you're actually building out new infrastructure for the first time and testing code, if you do have issues, you've got this diagnostic capability to actually look into it and understand what's happening. Further to that, in a test and dev environment, especially if you're building out a new application set and using existing data, the ability to effectively take a clone of the data from an existing database and apply it to a test and dev environment within another SQL database, and actually use that data and consistently refresh that data as you need it. It gets you through your testing much faster, and you get much better view of what's happening in that environment. And finally, one of the biggest issues that a lot of people find from a database perspective with SQL Server and other databases is how do you protect that data? And one of the things that you can do with the Tintri platform is you can actually take snapshots in real time without actually creating any stun for the application. And if you're not familiar what stun is the problem sometimes, especially if you're triggering a copy through the vCenter environment. So vCenter itself is starting to take a copy of that data. it can actually slow down the operation of that particular virtual machine. So you can see impact on performance during the process of actually taking that clone. But the way that Tintri does it, it's done within the storage platform itself, so that when you take that snapshot, it's near immediate, but also there's no hit in performance on the actual database or the application that's utilizing that database at that point in time. So it means now you can actually take snapshots more often without the risk of affecting performance to your user population, whether that's internal or external. And if you can take your snapshots more regularly, you've got more points in time you can go back to when you're doing your recovery. And I did see earlier today that Carnival Cruises have been hit with a ransomware attack. Imagine having to be able to do snapshots every minute and be able to recover to a minute before the ransomware attack happened. Wouldn't that be a great position to be in? Be able to recover that quickly after an incident, and also just before the incident happened. So a very small amount of data difference between the point you are and the point you're recovering to. So some real benefits in that respect. This new version, being released at the moment with the SQL capabilities, is going to be of great interest to a lot of organisations, and not only in the way that you can actually protect and also give higher performance for your database, but also the granularity of it. So you can actually look at each individual database from perspective, and you can protect each individual database as well, rather than having to protect a complete LUN if you're using a traditional environment, or a complete SQL server if it was in a standard environment. So it gives you a lot of capabilities around protecting that data. Like I said, with no impact on performance, you can do it more regularly without having any issues. And again, because of the data dedupe capabilities, when you're taking those snapshots, you're not taking up a great deal of space, because it's only really the differences since the last one was taken. So, more frequent ones, you're not taking up a great deal of space. So some real benefits there. But coming back to how databases are utilized, especially in test and dev environments, a lot of organizations have moved towards agile development. So they're using a DevOps framework. And a part of that DevOps framework, we're commonly building out CI/CD pipelines, and we're doing a lot of automation. That's one, to build the infrastructure using things like Terraform and Ansible, and then to actually trigger the data to be installed into that environment as well. So again, using the API and also scripting languages, very easy to automate that process and build it into your CI/CD pipeline. So you can quite quickly build the infrastructure, push the test data into it if it's just for a testing environment, or push the live data into it when it moves into production. Really simple processes and really easy to protect that data. But again, giving you that really granular analytics, really granular diagnostic capabilities, and also providing a really simple way to manage and operate. Again, a lot of organizations we're dealing with don't have very specialized storage people anymore. They're using standard virtualization engineers to be able to look after the storage that's associated with the VMware or other hypervisor environment. The Tintri platform is really simple to utilize, and you can actually use anyone to actually do that. It's got some basic technical capabilities. So really simple to put it into production and to operate it without specialist knowledge. And going back to the beginning where I said that we'd implemented in around about 30 minutes most Tintri implementations, and that's without any real specialist skills in the storage area to do that, because there's nothing to do in that space. You're not having to create RAID groups, you're not having to create LUNs, you're not having to publish those and attach them to the environment. It's one big lump of storage that's available straight away, and you can drop in their virtual machines or databases quite. Secondary, if you want to separate those out because you've got, say, a multi-tenanted environment, or you want to separate them out between things like production and the test and dev environment, that's quite straightforward to do. And you can even have different networks attached for those as well. So really simple to isolate these as well as to isolate themselves. But I think one of the key things is the built-in ability of the system to understand what the workloads require and to constantly update that to ensure that you get the best performance for your work. Final thing, if you don't want to give a large amount of performance or get the optimal performance, you can actually reduce it. So there are quality of service metrics around IOPS and throughput that you can actually apply to it to restrict the amount of capacity utilized by a database or a workload, the workload you choose to. Most organizations we deal with don't do that. They just leave it to do its own thing, and they always get the best performance out of all without any. And it's the simplest way to do things. But it's utilizing artificial intelligence and machine learning to understand. Also, there are on the analytics side of things, will actually give you some idea about capacity going forward. You can look up forward about 18 months to understand what your capacity is going to look like with organic growth based on what you're currently doing. And that's both from a database and a VMware perspective. And finally, you can also model that. So you can actually go in there and say, what if I had 3 times the amount of databases? Or if I implemented a VDI environment, what capacity would I utilize then? And it will actually give you a prediction of that. So looking at capacity management and things is much easier using these type of technology. Hopefully it's been an interesting piece for you today. Please join me tomorrow. It's our Ops Ramp Wednesday tomorrow, and we talk about ITOM and AIOps on a Wednesday. Or come back next week if you're more interested in the Tintri and the storage angle, and we'll be on again next Tuesday at 3 p.m. But Ops Ramp Wednesday tomorrow, 3 p.m., talking about ITOM AIOps. Thank you very much.